Evening all. Apologies for the last couple of weeks. I haven't done a Biscuit show for that time. 2 weeks ago I had a really heavy cold and my throat was acting up and I was coughing a lot, so I really wasn't up for doing a weekly Biscuit or any kind of video presentation. Last week I was on holiday and I was going to do a Biscuit episode last Monday. But what happened was I got an impromptu call-up by the academic agent to appear on Unpopular Opinions. And as things happened, I ended up talking about the things on that live stream that I was going to talk about on the Biscuit. So I didn't think I wanted to double up on that. So here we are. I've got some fresh ideas, some fresh thoughts, and I want to jump right into them. So the first thing I want to do, and I think this sets the tone for this video, is talk about a policy that I'm instituting not just on my YouTube channel, but also on my Twitter account, my Facebook account, and also my main website. And that is, I'm declaring a zero tolerance policy on lying. And I mean deliberate lying. I have been a script writer, so I had somebody say to me years ago, how do you feel about telling lies for a living? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you're a scriptwriter, you write fiction. That's lying. And I was quite taken aback by that because, yes, I'm creating a fictional setting and fictional characters. I would hope that deep down there's some kind of honesty and truth in what I write. But what I mean is deliberate lying without the, the pretense when you're writing a book or a screenplay that you are setting out your stall, that this is a fictional world. You're not trying to make people think it's real. You can try and write things to sound convincing or realistic, but at no stage are you saying this is real. Okay, that's the difference between script writing or any form of fiction writing and lying. And I've taken this no tolerance policy towards people lying very seriously. Because I'm going to segue this into what's been happening in the news and what I have encountered, particularly on Twitter and particularly in political discourse, that there are many people, and I would say the vast majority on the left, who just peddle lies and falsehoods, and they know they're peddling lies and falsehoods, but the truth doesn't matter to them. What matters is activism and getting their point across and scoring points off their political opponents and denouncing their political opponents. And I find this quite sickening. And this whole thing with Sarkar of Akkad brought this home to me. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I was on that democracy debate on academic agent General Sarkar, just showed up. I became a fanboy for a few seconds. He's here! This guy I've been watching for about 3 years now, the kind of pinnacle of YouTube commentators. And he's there. And he agreed with me on a couple of points. I just went into fanboy mode. But as I've been following him for a few years, I know about that tweet that he's getting into trouble with on the mainstream media about that he wouldn't rape Jess Phillips. It was a dark joke, but I've heard a lot worse. I've heard a lot worse from Frankie Boyle. And also the worst joke I ever heard, the worst taste joke I ever heard was made by Rob Newman of the Mary Whitehouse Experience, and it was about Myra Hindley. And Sargon's tweet was dark humour, but nowhere near in the league of what people on our lovely mainstream television have cracked in the past. Your license fee, people. And I could see the dishonesty there. The people on the left, activists, were saying this is terrible, it's a rape threat. Well, it was not a rape threat, it's a non-rape threat. He's saying quite openly, hey, I wouldn't rape you. But it's still dark humour, and it was meant to attack her, both her virtue signalling on Twitter, which Jess Phillips does a lot of, and also as a retort to her attitude towards men's rights issues. I mean, she was openly dismissive and mocking when Philip Davis was mentioning men's rights issues, she completely missed the point. What Davis was saying as well, that one of the reasons why there's such a higher male suicide rate compared with women is that men have not been able to talk about their problems. So she doesn't think, oh, men have got every opportunity to talk about their problems. The data, the evidence, the psychologists who comment on this would disagree with her. But you can see this in the interviews, old archive interviews, when these points are put to her, that she's very dismissive, contemptuous. She'd rather be talking about anything other than male suicide rates or men having difficulty arranging custody or even access to their children after a divorce, and things like prostate cancer. She just doesn't care, and she openly admits on Twitter that she's an aggressive bitch. Her words, not mine. And I find this whole thing where the left is saying this Sargon is such a terrible, awful human being, and they misrepresent his words, and they don't put his rape comment, or not rape comment, in its proper context, because context is something that is irrelevant to the left. I've noticed that they don't have the concept of context. They strip it away. It's just the words. The words themselves are always the problems with the left. Never the context, never the setting, never the background. And as somebody who, I started off, when I was at university, I was thinking of being a historian, and I'm still an amateur historian to this day. But I know how important context is, and knowing where just an incident fits into the wider perspective of trying to understand history. So it angers me that people deliberately lie, misconstrue, strip away context in order to score political points. And that is why I've instituted this no tolerance policy. And you'll see, if you're following me on Twitter, you'll see me just go, the liar of the day. I will find them. There's tons of them about. And it's the person, right? I'm not saying the person who's mistaken, or the person who's got some of their facts wrong. I get my facts wrong. I am mistaken on a number of occasions. I might have an opinion that doesn't quite gel with yours. I mean, I'm thinking about my skepticism about anarcho-capitalism, and I have these kind of mostly friendly debates with anarcho-capitalists where I share my skepticism, and they try and convince me that their ideology would work in practice. But there's always a kind of respectfulness, and I never try and be dishonest. What I'm trying to do is ask tough questions and come up with scenarios that I think might likely happen. I'm not just being obtuse for obtuseness sake. I'm not trying to score points. I'm trying to break test some people's theories, but I'm not being dishonest about it. But what I don't like about activists is that they are extremely dishonest. And I've had this problem ever since I was at university. I couldn't get on with Marxist history because Marxist history is very selective with the facts, and it strips away context, and everything has to fit into the theory. The theory comes first, and everything has to fit into it. Whereas a proper historian would look at all this information that is in front of them and piece together what has happened from taking into consideration everything that you can find on the subject. Why did this battle happen? Why did this political party and that president win an election? Why were these laws coming into effect? Why did this political movement happen? You look at everything and you discard nothing, and the theory you come up with is the one that kind of fits the facts you have available. And if something inconvenient comes in, you modify your premise in order to accommodate the information that you've got. So yes, there is now going to be a zero tolerance policy. And if you see me being a bit of a dick on Twitter, when I call people out for lying, well, that's the reason why, because I can spot it, and I'm very good at spotting lies as well, because there's facial tics or tells that you can spot. The one I pointed out with Jack Conte is that he never lets his gaze settle on the person he's talking to. His gaze shifts all over the place. Interesting enough, Jack Dorsey doesn't do that. Jack Dorsey is more makes more eye contact, but sometimes he goes a bit zen. Sometimes his body language is that he tunes out his environment around him, and he goes to a happy place in his head. It's not exactly lying, but it is kind of fantasy land for him. So I spot this all the time. So yeah, I've got my zero tolerance policy on liars, and my challenge to anybody who is on the left who might be watching this, and that is, don't give me your narratives and give me your facts. If you are an honest person, we'll get on fine, even though you're on the other side of the fence. And next is a question I want to ask people, and that is, why are a lot of the dedicated Remainers so passionate about the EU? I see it in Facebook and Twitter bios. I have a friend of mine that I've known for nearly 30 years, and he says now, I'm passionate about remaining in the EU. And I think, what's the reason for the passion? Why? I can understand why people would think, remaining in the European Union would be better for us. There's economic reasons. I don't agree with them. But you can make a reasonable case for remaining in the EU based around various things. I don't want to see European nations going to war with each other again, or I think it would be better economically. The argument that kind of makes some sense, even though I disagree with it, is that we live in a world now of massive trading blocks, of political superpowers, and that individual European nations cannot compete with Russia, America, China, India, so they have to merge in order to be on an equal footing. Again, it's a position I disagree with, but it has some kind of internal consistency. But this idea, and I think it was Radical Liberation, who's a frequent guest on Unpopular Opinion, said, "Well, I don't get the why people are passionate about the European Union. There's nothing that is worthy of passion and such utter devotion." And I'm struggling. One idea put out there is racism. People don't want to be seen as racist, so they say they love the EU. My problem with that is that the EU is demographically is mostly white, so I don't see how that's racist. Because you don't want to merge your country in with Germany, how does that make you somehow racist? The race argument for Brexit, I think, is flimsy. My thoughts on it were that some people want to be controlled by oligarchies. They like structure. They like big, overarching structures, big corporations handling all the business, a vast bureaucracy just running their day-to-day lives and keeping all the unpleasantness away, and that they mistrust the chaos that can come with democracy. But really, I don't know. I mean, that's just a working theory. If anybody's got any suggestions why people are passionate about a large supranational political body, and why people would ever get sort of passionate about people like Guy Verhofstadt and Jean-Claude Juncker, please let me know. This is the enduring mystery of FBPE Remainers. Speaking of passion, the other big thing this week has been the Extinction protesters. These are young eco-warriors who have fallen in line that we've only got 12 years left to live on the planet, and they're protesting. They're protesting mainly about capitalism. They're going to try and shut down airports. This got into the news for a number of reasons. One, it was reasonably sized protest. There were a lot of arrests. The demographic, mostly millennials, um, getting involved in this, and inevitable celebrities. But what I find really interesting is how this, I believe these protests are a cover for communism, because it seems that very far left people have been promoting this and the ideas around it. Basically, the things that they are insisting upon, that they're pushing. It's this idea of everybody should go vegan, nobody should fly, and we should end capitalism. So this kind of restriction on individual liberty and the promotion of communism makes this, it's essentially a communist front dressed up in ecological trappings. So what is particularly ludicrous about this movement is how, again, like a lot of things that emerge from the Fabian middle class left, it's sneering very much at the working classes. No, you cannot move around. No, you can't go on holiday abroad. You can't move. You can't own things. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't eat the food you want to eat. And it's very sneering at the working class, and exemplified by the actress Emma Thompson, who fully endorsed this protest, and then she flew thousands of miles in a plane. The one thing that we were told we couldn't do, and they're so full of it. Frankly, all the leaders of this, they will fly to their destinations. They will fly to their protest zones. They will do all these things. They'll virtue signal. They'll consume like there's no tomorrow, and they just want the rest of us to change our lifestyle. They don't have to, because they're leaders. They're the anointed. They're the ones who are making things better for all our lives. So they don't have to change their ways. We have to change their ways. Funnily enough, they don't go to the two biggest polluting countries on the planet, China and India. No, they won't touch those with a barge pole. It's the likes of you and me here in the United Kingdom, the United States, Australia, Canada, the developed world. No, we have to bite the bullet. We have to stay in our little cubby holes and eat our tofu burgers like good little proles. So I take it all with a pinch of salt. I also take this claim, we've only got 12 years left to live, with a pinch of salt. Because if it was really that bad, every government would institute a kind of eco-autocracy right away. We'd be put on ration. They would act. No, this is just a front for communism. It always was, and I'm not falling for the hype. Speaking of communism, let's talk about Ash Sarkar for a moment. Literally a communist. Now, I find it particularly objectionable that she's getting so much mainstream media airtime, particularly on the BBC. I consider her views and her political alignment to be as abhorrent, if not more so, than Nazism and fascism. We all know that communism has killed more people than any other political ideology in history. And if you're going to put Ash Sarkar on our TV screens, using my license payer money, then she should be treated the same way that Nick Griffin of the BNP was treated a few years ago. She should be pushed back on her ideas constantly, and she gets very soft rides from official BBC presenters, and it took the likes of the maverick historian David Starkey to pull her down a few pegs. I particularly like the way he was asking for evidence of her claims, and she told an anecdote, and he just stopped her and said, "That is an anecdote, that is not evidence. I thought you were an academic. I was wrong." It was a brilliant put down, and rightly so. But anyway, in the news this week, she got onto Twitter, and she said that she was looking forward to the day when she could appropriate all of Lord Sugar's money. She says appropriate, I say theft. It's such a dumb tweet to put out there, and again, it just shows why she shouldn't be on mainstream television without being absolutely pulled apart. First of all, Lord Sugar's a clever man. All these millionaire entrepreneurs are clever people. They are going the first sign that Jeremy Corbyn and Ash Sarkar are going to get their hands on the system of government and dismantle capitalism. They're out of here. They'll be out of our country, and they'll be in a pro-capitalist country somewhere else in the world. They've probably got their bolt holes worked out already. The escape plan. All I can say is, Lord Sugar, if you've got your bolt hole and your escape plan, please take me with you. Okay. So that's stupid, but of her to tweet that. She doesn't understand the concept that people act out of a self-interest, and that self-interest, self-preservation, they're not going to sign up for a communist regime if they are in any way successful. And also, she's just openly talking about theft, and I don't think that will go down well with people outside of her base. Already she's getting considerable pushback on social media, the kind of pushback she doesn't experience when she's on mainstream media. And this circles back to what Sargon of Akkad said in his speech. I actually, it was a daring speech, but I actually quite liked it when he called out the mainstream media and said, "You guys are dying. Legacy media is dying." He's absolutely right. It was a brutal way of putting it. I particularly like the way he signed off with "Get Ben." When was the last time mainstream media journalists were told to get Ben? He had a press conference. I thought it was great. So again, we got hard work ahead of us, and where does this leave the mainstream right when we've got actual communists out everywhere, and the media and our academic institutions are backing them all the way? I don't know. I don't know what the future for the mainstream right is right now. I would just echo what Jordan Peterson said, and his rule is tell the truth, or at least don't lie. That's what we've got at the moment. I mean, it may not move mountains, it may not win back Britain from the communist hordes, but you'll sleep better at night if you're honest. Trust me. And on that bombshell, I'm not going to take the biscuit this week. I'm going to tuck into this and watch Line of Duty. I'll serve you with a Regulation 15, son. So until next time, good night.